I think it's worth our while to revise the three readings we have just heard. So in the first reading taken from Isaiah, we are reminded about a beautiful poem. It's a story, a poem of love, a poem of dedication, a poem of tender loving care. But it is also a story of disappointment. That poetry tells us how the owner of the vineyard planted choicest vines, built a watchtower, made a wine press, the whole works that have to do with tender loving care. But then after all the effort, after all the hard work, what he saw was just wild grapes. Wild grapes. At times, that's what happens to us. But wait until I do the revision of the second and the third. In the second reading, Paul's letter to the Philippians counsels us who are bothered by so many things to have no anxiety and to not hesitate to make our requests known to the Lord and to think of whatever is true, good, beautiful, worthy of praise, what is honorable. Think of positive things and do positive things. But then the gospel brings us right back to reality. We have a story of the vineyard owner who sent tenants to take care of the vineyard that he loved. He took care of, prepared. There was not much else to do on the tenant's part except to guard it and to make sure that the harvest would mean that it will be divided justly, equally, equitably between them. But then what happened is not just disappointment, but a story of cruelty, a story of greed, a story of ingratitude, ingrato. Ginawa na ng lahat ng paraan, pinatay pa yung katulong, pinatay pa yung anak. What do you call this? This is the problem of the world now, summarized in three words: speed, scale, selfishness. The speed with which the Hamas and the Palestinians attack Israel and catching them off guard just about 15-20 hours ago. Already 70 Israelis have died and 200 Palestinians have been killed. The speed with which things develop, the technologies, and if your cell phone is 6 months old, you've got to change it because the planned obsolescence thing makes it untenable to have an old gadget. The speed, the scale with which corruption happens, the confidential funds that are increasing every year, the PPP that not everybody receives but increase to the tunes of hundreds of billions, tens of billions. It started with only 4 billion in 2004 or 5, but then now it's tens of billions. And I do know for a fact that not everybody receives it, depending on whom they voted for. The speed, the scale with which Russia destroys Ukraine, the scale by which China has invaded West Philippine Sea and considers it their own, kanila na lahat. Then I ask the Romans to come back from the grave and give us a map that tells us that the whole world belongs to the Roman Empire. And what is the bottom line? The third S, selfishness. Ang katakawan, ang kasakiman, ang pagkakimkim, pagkakamkam. At ang gusto pa ay palakihin at ibalik ang imperyo ng Soviet Union. This is a story of disappointment. Disappointment is not just what happens in the world, it also happens in our families. How many of you parents have not been disappointed with your children? Nowadays, only those who have Latin honors have the right not anymore to pass the civil service exams. Those with Latin honors, they are exempted. But we belong to a labor surplus economy. We have millions more of graduates every year with no jobs available. And that's increasing. And therefore they have no choice but to go to the Middle East, to Italy, even to Eastern Europe, to Poland, to Ireland. Every country where there were no Filipinos just 15 years ago. But we are everywhere now. We are a labor surplus economy. But even then, so many people, so many Filipinos don't have homes. They are informal settlers, many of us. But the politicians are talking of confidential funds. If those confidential funds were spent on housing, then I will agree with it. Then maybe we'll talk not of speed and scale of selfishness, but of grandiosity, of largesse, of generosity, which is the generosity of the vineyard owner of today. He gave it all. He gave everything there was to give, and more. But the tenants behaved differently. They were at a different frame of mind. They were cruel, they were greedy, and they were murderers. Disappointment. We all are trying our best, but what do we see? Well, you have a big war now happening between Hamas and Israel. The Hamas were able to capture an army base in the southern Israel near Tel Aviv. The West Philippine Sea is no more. It's just in the map, on the map. It belongs to the 9-dash line, whatever that means for the greedy Chinese Communist Party. We are facing an expansionist Russian Empire. We have talked of confidential funds. And closer to home base, we are witnessing a seemingly disunited church fighting tooth and nail about synodality. And without let-up, araw-araw may mga nagbabangay na mga dapat ay nagtuturo sa atin ng pagkakaisa at pagsasama-sama. And when we are disappointed, what do? We take it out on the most vulnerable. When we are disappointed, our disappointment blooms into anger. And anger is energy in motion, it's emotion. It needs an outlet, it needs an object. Kaya sino sa inyong di nakaranas ng hanger, ng walis tambo, walis tingting ng bata? Pag nagalit yung nanay nung araw, lahat ng mahawakan, pati hanger. Diba? Ngayon di na pwede yan. Makukulong ka. Pero when we are disappointed, it blooms into anger. And that anger that looks for an object. And when the object is the most vulnerable, binubuli natin yung pilay, yung walang kakaya-kayang manlaban. And that is why bullies love weak countries like the Philippines. China loves to bully us. Why? They know all our secrets. They know all our bases. They are here. They're all over the place. They behave differently from the Chinese who were born here. They are gruff and rough, and they have no manners. And you compare them to Chinese born here who are Chinese Filipinos, there is a whole, a yard long, a mile long difference between them. What gives and what's different? We look at today's readings and see, are we gonna remain in our disappointment? No, that is not my job. My job is to give hope, and that is exactly why. At my age, I'm still trying my best to prepare my homilies every time. And what is the hope? The hope is there hidden behind a single line, a one-liner that we said after the first reading. The vineyard of the Lord is the house of Israel. And go look back at the first reading and the third reading. The vineyard was the object of tender loving care. The vineyard was the object of responsibility. And according to C.S. Lewis, what you love, you have to show four things: care, respect, responsibility, and knowledge. If you love your grandchildren, you would care for them, you would be responsible for them, you would know them more, and you would take care of them, respect them, respect, responsibility, and knowledge. And so there are two takeaways that I'd like us to focus on based on what we just said. Number one, this sounds cruel, but it is the reality. A message that is hiding from the parable. And what is this message? There is no place in the kingdom for those who do not produce fruit. Bawal ang mga walang sukli, walang panukli. Kung ikaw ay tumanggap, kinakailangan magbalik, kinakailangan manukli ng tama, ng maganda. No place in the kingdom for those who do not produce fruit. The disappointment of the vineyard owner had to do with wild grapes. That was not what he was expecting. The disappointment of the other vineyard owner in the gospel had to do with tenants who couldn't produce anything in return after all the tender loving care, after everything that he has done. They even did a crime, killed the tenants and killed his own son. No place in the kingdom for those who say, wala ako walang laman ng bulsa ko. Wala kang, ikaw na puro hingi ka. Wala akong maibibigay, maibabalik. No place in the kingdom for people who have nothing to give back. And second takeaway that I'd like us to bring home, be careful what you throw away. According to Pope Francis, we now belong to a throwaway culture. We throw away everything. In the world of fast fashion, after 6 months, those clothes that you bought in Hong Kong are no longer fashionable because fast fashion is people are designed and programmed to get tired of it after a few months. So it becomes ukay-ukay from the Philippines. The business of ukay-ukay is born out of fast fashion. Pinagsawaan, hindi nasira, hindi pinaglumaan, pinagsawaan. Be careful what you throw away. Why? In the gospel we are told, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord has this been done, and it is wonderful in our eyes. We reject the Lord when it is not convenient. We throw Him aside when it is not helping us any. Meet the speed in the scale and the selfishness goals. We set Him aside when He doesn't serve our best purposes, right here, right now. Be careful whom you throw away. The person we reject is the one who could save us. The stone that builders rejected is the cornerstone. And may I insist on what we have uttered about 6 times after the first reading. The Lord does care for you and me. The vineyard of the Lord is the house of Barangay Don Bosco.